Hey there, viewers. Just minutes ago, Diddy was rushed from his prison cell straight to the hospital. But it's what he said once he got there that has everyone rattled. The confession he made? It wasn't about pain. It was about something much darker. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The one shift I should have called out. It wasn't supposed to be a hard night. My shift started like every other. Cold coffee in a cracked thermos, a leftover sandwich in my bag, and my hair barely tied up right. The fluorescent lights in MDC Brooklyn's infirmary flickered like always, humming low and sickly above my head. Most nights here blur together. The same meds, the same patients, the same echo of distant yelling through cinderblock walls. I'd been doing this job a little over 3 years now, nurse assistant, not even the real deal nurse, but long enough to know the difference between weird and off. That night was off before it even began. It started around 11:30. The intercom cracked, barely audible, and someone barked for all infirmary staff to prep for restricted intake. That doesn't happen unless someone important is coming in. Not important like governor's visit or oversight committee. I mean the kind of important that walks in with 6 officers and no name on the clipboard. I'd only seen it once before, and this time I had no idea who it was. Until I did. We didn't have time to ask questions. One of the older nurses, Connie, told me to prep exam room 2. No explanation. Just gloves, masks, full kit. I could feel the shift in the air, thick, nervous. Even the guards weren't cracking jokes like usual. They looked straight ahead, eyes glazed, shoulders tense, like they were trying not to see what they were seeing. Then I heard the wheels. That sound, the rubbery squeal of a gurney being pushed too fast, echoed down the hall. My heart picked up. I stepped out of the room just in time to see them coming around the corner. 4 correctional officers, 2 on each side of the stretcher, were guiding it like it was radioactive, and on it, barely moving, was him. I recognized him immediately. His face was everywhere once, wasn't it? Music videos, billboards, designer colognes, but lying there, he didn't look like a celebrity. He looked like a ghost. He was pale, not just light-skinned, but gray, like something had drained the warmth from him. His cheeks were sunken in, bones jutting out like someone had pressed the fast-forward button on his aging. His lips were dry and cracked. His eyes, they weren't closed, not fully, just half-lidded, like he wasn't quite here but not completely gone either. And his hair, it had gone almost fully gray, the kind of color I've only ever seen on men twice his age. It didn't look dyed, it looked dead. They wheeled him past me, and I caught the smell. Sharp, chemical, almost metallic. I've smelled blood, vomit, infection, but this was something else. Something sterile and wrong, like something you're not supposed to breathe in for too long. Vitals crashing, one of the guards muttered into his radio. Another shouted for the doc. We got him inside, onto the bed, and the real nurse came in fast behind me, but it was me who pulled the straps across his chest, me who clipped the monitor leads to his chest. I didn't even know if I was allowed to touch him, but no one told me otherwise. Everyone was too quiet. The guards stood near the walls, hands twitching near their belts. One of them had his eyes on me the whole time. I'd never seen him before. Tall, buzzed hair, no name tag. He didn't look like he belonged here. He didn't move like the others. He stood too. I tried not to think about him watching me while I did my job. That's when I noticed the marks. There were 4, maybe 5 little punctures along the inside of Diddy's right arm. Not in a line like a normal IV. No bruising either, just these perfect dots. Like they'd been made by something precise, not a needle. I checked the intake notes, nothing about injections or prior blood draws. "Do you see this?" I whispered to the nurse. She looked, nodded once, and kept working like it meant nothing. But I saw the way her eyes narrowed. Then he started mumbling. Not loud, not like someone trying to talk, more like someone dreaming and trying to drag the words out with them. They put something in the walls. That's what he said first. I froze, hand still on the blood pressure cuff. It wasn't just me. His voice was rough, broken. It sounded like it hurt to talk. I leaned in without thinking. I wasn't the first. I don't know what I expected. Maybe more. Maybe something that made sense. But all I got was that 3 lines that felt like a brick dropped into my stomach. I stepped back. I told myself not to react. People say all kinds of things when they're sedated or half-conscious. Hallucinations, dreams, fragments. It could have been anything. But the way he said it, it didn't sound confused. It sounded like a warning. The doctor came in then, finally. He didn't say much. Didn't ask questions like he usually does. Just checked the vitals, flipped through the chart like he was reading gibberish, and leaned over to hear Diddy mutter something else. I couldn't hear what he said that time, but I saw the doctor's face. He went pale, paler than Diddy. Then he stood up, closed the folder, and walked out. Just like that. Didn't give orders, didn't check back. And he never came back for the rest of the shift. That room felt colder after he left. The rest of the night, nobody spoke about it. The guards rotated, the nurse left early. I stayed behind because no one told me otherwise. I watched Diddy sleep, or maybe not sleep. He twitched sometimes, whimpered. Once, I swear, he reached toward the wall like he was trying to touch something that wasn't there. That same guard, the quiet one with no name tag, hovered near the doorway. I felt his eyes on me, on the monitors, on the closed blinds. I tried not to meet his stare, but once I did, just for a second, and I'll never forget it. He didn't blink, didn't look away, just smiled. Not friendly, not threatening, just like he knew something I didn't. At 4:03 a.m., another team came. No introduction. They wore dark scrubs, not MDC issued. One of them carried a sealed case. They unplugged Diddy, restrapped him, and rolled him out without a word. I wasn't even sure I was supposed to be in the room when it happened, but nobody stopped me. They acted like I wasn't there. And just like that, he was gone. I went back to the nurse's station and sat down, hands still shaking where he'd whispered near it. I didn't write it down. I didn't clock out. I just sat there, and I didn't sleep for the next 2 days. I tried to tell Connie what he said. She told me to keep my voice down, said if I wanted to keep my job, I'd pretend I never heard anything. You didn't see him, she said. You saw a patient. That's all, and patients don't talk about walls. I've had hard shifts before, bloody ones, screaming ones. Nights where inmates punched holes in the walls or OD'd in their bunks, but this was different. It wasn't just a bad shift. It felt like a secret trying to crawl out of someone who wasn't allowed to speak. And something tells me he's not the only one. Chapter 2. His cell's empty. You didn't hear that from me. They say this place eats time. You go long enough without sunlight, long enough hearing nothing but locks clicking and men yelling through metal, and eventually the hours blur together. You forget which day is which, forget which faces belong to what inmates. But I remember that morning. I remember it too well to ever forget it. Because I've worked C Block for 8 years, and never, not once, have I seen a cell vanish. I was pulling on my uniform in the locker room when Torres sat down on the bench across from me, peeling an orange like his fingers were made of wire. We usually shoot the shit about sports or CO gossip, but that morning he just looked at me and said, "You heard they cleared 3C last night?" I frowned, stopped mid-settle. "Who?" He lowered his voice, eyes darting to the door. "Diddy. Gone. And I mean, gone. Gone." Now, I'd seen the man myself a few times. They moved him different, never with the rest of intake. First week he got here, they had him in isolation. When they moved him to C block, he got the third cell from the end, the one with reinforced glass and modified ventilation. I remember thinking how weird it was to upgrade the ductwork just for a guy already locked up. But nobody asked questions. Not here, especially not when it came to him. I waved Taurus off, said, "They probably just moved him to med again. He's been looking like hell." Torres shook his head. "They scrubbed the whole thing, took the mattress, sheets, everything, like he was never there, even pulled the bars off the bed frame." I didn't believe it. I told myself Torres was messing with me, playing into all the rumors flying around the last few weeks, but I still couldn't shake what he said. So after roll call, I made my way down to C block, taking the long route so no one noticed. When I got there, I stood in front of 3C and just stared. Torres wasn't lying. The cell wasn't just empty, it was sterilized, bleached. I mean that literally. The stench of chemicals slapped me in the face before I even got close. The walls looked freshly painted, not a single mark or stain. The mattress was gone, the frame was gone. Even the bolts that used to hold the frame down had been filled in and sealed over. And the little pinhole camera above the door, standard in every cell, was now covered with black tape. No personal effect, not even a cup. Hell, even the number plaque on the wall had been removed, like it had never been a cell to begin with. I checked the logbook for movement orders. Nothing. Not a single line mentioning an inmate transfer, med escort, or lockdown sweep. I asked Captain Rodwell about it on my break. He barely looked up from his coffee, just muttered, "What cell? You've been watching C block too long, man. Get some rest." That was the moment the unease turned into something worse. Because I'd seen how they move inmates before. There's paperwork, procedures, even the dangerous ones, they leave a trail. But this felt like someone was trying to erase more than just a man. They were erasing the idea of him. Flashbacks hit me as I sat in the break room, trying to make sense of it. Diddy wasn't like the others. The inmates didn't speak his name out loud. Some gave him space, like he was contagious. Others stared too long, whispering behind their hands, saying he looked like he'd already died and come back. They said he'd pace his cell for hours, not talking, just tapping his knuckles against the wall in these slow, rhythmic patterns. One guy joked that it sounded like he was sending Morse code to hell. Then there was the time Ramos, an inmate with more guts than sense, decided to heckle him during yard call. Walked right up behind him, tapped him on the shoulder, said something I couldn't hear. I just remembered Diddy turning slowly and looking him dead in the eyes. Ramos stepped back like he'd been slapped. Next morning, he was gone. Not transferred, not in the hole. Just gone. Nobody could find a file. Staff said he never existed. That was when people started calling him cursed. I wasn't superstitious back then. I'm still not really. But there's something about this place, this block, this wing, that messes with your sense of what's real. And now that his cell was wiped clean, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't just dealing with a sick inmate. We were dealing with something no one wanted to admit existed. I didn't say a word the rest of the day. Did my rounds like I was supposed to. But when my shift ended, I didn't head straight out. I doubled back, told the new guy I left something in my locker. He didn't ask questions. It was past midnight by then. The halls were quiet, just the hum of electricity through old wires and the occasional clank of pipes settling in the walls. I walked slow. Every step toward 3C made my skin tighten. When I reached the cell, I stood in the dark, just me and the buzz of overhead lights. I should have walked away, but I didn't. And that's when I heard it. A whisper, faint, like it was being pulled through layers of concrete and steel. I couldn't make out the words, just that it was human, raspy, deliberate. I stepped closer, pressed my ear to the cell door. The whispering stopped. I waited. Then something shifted inside the vent near the back of the room. I unhooked my flashlight from my belt, shined it through the reinforced window. Most of the room still looked empty, sterile. But then I saw it. Something sticking out of the vent at floor level. A tiny corner of folded paper, almost too small to notice. I stared at it for what felt like forever. Then I keyed open the door and stepped inside. Every hair on my body stood up. The room felt colder than the hallway. The air was dry, sharp. I crouched down, used my keys to pry the vent cover off. The paper was jammed in tight, like it had been hidden for a reason. I unfolded it. The ink was smeared, like someone wrote it in a hurry, or like they'd been sweating through the whole thing. There were only 2 lines. They put something in me. If you're reading this, you're next. I froze. My breath caught in my chest. I looked around the room like someone else might be standing there, but there was nothing, just silence, and that damned bleach smell. I didn't pocket the note. I didn't throw it away. I just stared at it for a long time before folding it back up and stuffing it in my vest. Part of me didn't even want to take it with me, but something deeper, something primal told me not to leave it behind. Like whatever this was, it wasn't over. Not even close. As I walked out, I swear I felt something brush past my shoulder. No breeze, no sound, just the faintest sense that I wasn't alone anymore. That something in that room had noticed me and followed. I didn't tell Torres, didn't tell Rodwell, didn't even tell my brother, who works down in booking. I just went home, locked my doors, and sat in my kitchen till the sun came up. The note still in my pocket, like it was burning through the fabric. And now I can't stop thinking about the way Diddy looked that last time I saw him. Not scared, not angry, just resigned. Like he knew this would happen, like it had already happened before. And now I'm wondering if maybe it's not just him they're trying to erase. Maybe it's anyone who hears the whisper. Chapter 3. The riots weren't about food. I wasn't supposed to be in that building again. My role's internal compliance, logistics, paperwork, a glorified desk job wrapped in a badge and a pension. But when MDC Brooklyn lit up for 37 minutes straight, 3 injured guards, 1 inmate in critical condition, 2 entire units locked down, they dragged me back into the field. They needed someone with clearance, someone with history, someone who knew how to keep things quiet without asking too many questions. They told me it was food, spoiled meatloaf, old milk. I've heard worse excuses. They said a dozen inmates got sick, tempers flared, a fight turned into a riot. That's the story we were supposed to rubber stamp for oversight, open and shut. Internal review, minor disciplinary actions, a report filed and forgotten by next fiscal quarter. But the moment I stepped through the gates, I knew something didn't add up. The mood inside was wrong, not tense, hollow, like the building itself had been holding its breath since it happened. The guards weren't whispering about paperwork or hazard pay. They were keeping their eyes on the cameras, the vents, the corners. Nobody was making eye contact. That's what caught me first, how still everyone was. Like if they moved too fast, something might notice. I spent the first 2 hours reviewing preliminary incident reports. Most of them vague copy-pasted from previous disturbances. Nothing about Diddy, nothing about his cell, nothing useful. That was my next red flag. You don't get 3 floors locked down over a food fight. You don't get full med-evac protocol over sour milk. So I started pulling interview transcripts from the SHU. The first few were useless, recycled excuses. Some guys claimed they saw rats. One said a guard insulted his mother, standard deflections. But then I got to a transcript flagged for redaction, marked unverified psychotic episode, inmate ID 4412, name withheld, solitary hold, currently under suicide watch. The transcript was incomplete. The last page was shredded. But the parts that remained, they didn't read like madness. They read like fear. The interviewer, Officer Landon, A nervous desk jockey who'd only been here 6 months asked a simple question. Why did you participate in the riot? The inmate's answer was immediate. We weren't rioting, we were trying to get away from it. Landon asked, from what? The reply, you know what, you saw the damn hallway. Then a pause. Then this line, you ever seen a man brought back from medical naked, strapped to a dolly, whispering in tongues? Landon asked what he meant. The inmate responded. They brought him back, just for a minute. Didn't even unstrap him. Rolled him into C block like he was a specimen. He was shaking, but his eyes weren't moving, kept saying the same thing over and over, in French, in Arabic, maybe Hebrew, I don't know. One guy thought it was Latin. He said it burned when he heard it. Another pause, then a line in handwriting scrawled in the margin by the interviewer. Subject begins trembling, eyes fixated on door. Interview terminated early due to elevated heart rate. I closed the folder and sat with that a while. They had brought him back? But why? For 10 minutes? No documentation, no logs. I checked the escort schedule. No movement orders from medical, no CO signatures, nothing to indicate Diddy ever left isolation. So why were there 3 inmates, each in separate units, who claimed to have seen him? And why was each one placed in solitary within 24 hours? The next transcript was shorter. Inmate refused to give a name. Voice modulation used. The interviewer was someone from HQ, meaning even I couldn't access the full audio. But I could read the line that mattered. We didn't riot over meals, the inmate said. We rioted because we realized what they're hiding. When pressed, the inmate refused to elaborate, just repeated the same phrase 4 times. We saw too much. That's when I decided to pull surveillance. I still had clearance for the archive room, though the tech had changed since I last worked floorside. MDC runs on digital now. Every hallway, every room, every angle saved in 24-hour backups, stored on redundant encrypted servers. Or so they say. I pulled the footage from the riot day. C block, D block, holding, yard. That's when I found the 3rd red flag. Dozens of hours of footage had been marked with a clearance tag I didn't recognize. Not BOP, not Homeland, not medical. This one just said 29B. The files were grayed out, unviewable, not deleted, sealed. I tried to override it, but the terminal logged me out. 3 failed attempts would have shut down my access for good, so I didn't push it. But one file hadn't been sealed, not fully. It was corrupt, likely missed during the lockout sweep. It was 3 seconds long. I played it. The frame was shaky, camera angled at a tilt near the ceiling of cell block D5, had been auxiliary wing that had supposedly been out of use since last year's fire inspection. The feed lit up suddenly, then snapped into focus. In those 3 seconds, I saw 4 people enter the cell. Not guards, not medical, hazmat suits, white, sealed, full visors, bulky gloves. They moved like clockwork, silent and fast. One carried a long case, black and ridged like a weapon container. Another had a tablet glowing green with unreadable data. And behind them, barely visible through the doorway, was something on the wall. At first I thought it was a shadow, but it moved, sliding upward like ink crawling across glass. It twisted once, then contracted, pulling itself into the upper corner of the cell before the feed cut to static. I replayed it again and again, the same 3 seconds, the same movement. Each time the shape seemed darker, heavier, and each time I watched, I felt something shift in my chest, like a knot tightening behind my ribs. I marked the footage as pending review and left the archive room in silence. By the time I reached the stairwell, my hands were shaking. It wasn't a riot, not the kind they're used to cataloging. Something happened in that wing, something they don't want us to see. These inmates, these ghosts in orange, they saw it, they felt it, and instead of being silenced, they did the only thing they could to draw attention. They screamed, they fought, they tore open the walls of this place hoping someone would look inside. And now I've seen it too, even if just for a second, which means someone else knows I have. Chapter 4. The Things He Said on That Gurney. The call came in just after 2 in the morning, and I remember thinking it was probably another overdose. That's what we usually get when it's a federal contract at that hour. Some inmate slips something past a pat-down, hearts failing code 3. But then I saw where the pickup was. MDC Brooklyn. And not just any wing, but the off-book medical intake they keep sealed from the main floors. My partner didn't ask questions. He never does. Too many years running with bureau contracts will burn the curiosity right out of you. I tried to match his energy, tried to play it cool, detached, but something about that address had my stomach in a knot before we even pulled out of the garage. We got to the side entrance around 2:23. It was dead quiet. No usual loading dock chaos, no escort chatter, no transfer paperwork waiting on a clipboard, just 2 guards in full tactical gear, standing under a busted yellow light that flickered like it had Parkinson's. One of them waved us in without a word. No names, no IDs, just a nod and a stiff finger pointed at the service corridor. They brought him out already strapped down, full body restraints, not just wrists and ankles, torso, thighs, even forehead. That's not standard, not even for violent offenders. I've seen cartel guys with more freedom of movement. And the worst part, he wasn't resisting. He was limp. Cold sweat soaking through the paper-thin hospital gown they had draped over him. No shoes, his feet were bruised, toenails cracked, skin dry like he hadn't touched sunlight in weeks, maybe months. He wasn't talking at first, just muttering under his breath, eyes open but unfocused. I thought he was having a seizure or a stroke, but the moment we started wheeling him into the back of the rig, he locked eyes with me. And that's when I knew this wasn't medical, it was something else. My partner started the monitors, heart rate, oxygen, blood pressure, all of them blinking irregular, unstable. The screen glitched every few seconds like it couldn't process the readings. We checked the connections, swapped cables, even restarted the unit. Same issue. And then the cabin lights started dimming, flickering at first, then fading in and out like we were losing voltage. We weren't. The engine was fine. The alternator was healthy. Every piece of gear had been tested earlier that day. But something in that van didn't want to play by the rules. I was leaning over to check his restraints again when he spoke. Not to me. Not to anyone, really. Just straight into the space between us. It's in the mirrors. His voice was scratchy, low, like something was caught in his throat that didn't belong there. I froze. He blinked slowly, his gaze shifting like he was following something moving across the ceiling. "It watches when I dream," he said. "It's always been watching. Before the money, before the music. I didn't build the altar. I just danced on it." I asked if he could hear me. No response. I checked his vitals again. Oxygen spiking now. Heart rate pushing 140. He was sweating harder, trembling, teeth lightly chattering like he was freezing. Then he grabbed my wrist. He didn't have strength. His grip wasn't firm, but his fingers were ice cold. And the second they touched my skin, it felt like I'd just dropped into water too deep to climb out of. "The parties weren't mine," he said. "I was the offering." That was the last full sentence he spoke. The rest was a jumble, fragments of something that might have been languages, or just madness dressed in syllables, a string of guttural sounds I couldn't place. Some of it might have been Spanish, but it was twisted, warped. He spoke as if his tongue didn't fully belong to his mouth anymore. My partner looked at me once during the drive, just once, and I saw fear in his face, real fear. I've never seen him like that, not in 10 years. We pulled up to the hospital's emergency entrance, one we'd used before, a small federal wing usually reserved for high-profile transport. There were supposed to be 2 orderlies and a federal intake nurse waiting, but when we opened the doors, nobody was there. I got out, walked inside to the desk, and gave them the patient code we were provided. They looked at me like I'd asked for directions to Mars. We didn't receive any federal transport. The clerk said, "No prisoner intake tonight. You sure you're at the right facility?" I stood there dumbfounded. I gave her the code again, showed her the BOP transfer tag. She double-checked, typed something into her terminal, then shook her head. "There's nothing here, no file, no holding room prepped. We don't even have a record of that code in the system." My partner wheeled him in anyway. The nurse on duty, an older guy I'd worked with before, saw Diddy on the gurney and just stopped moving. Eyes wide, mouth open, hands trembling as he reached for the crash cart. They took him into the back eventually, but it wasn't through normal protocol. No sign-ins, no formal handoff, no chain of custody. It was like watching a scene erased as it happened. We left without signatures, no documentation, no verbal confirmation, just a nod from one of the shadow types who showed up 10 minutes after we arrived. Plain clothes, earpiece, silent. The next day I filed an incident report. Standard protocol when gear malfunctions during transport and when patient records don't align. I described the power issues, the corrupted monitor feed, and the inconsistencies in hospital intake. 48 hours later, my supervisor called me into his office, closed the door, sat me down. "No folder, no file." "Drop it," he said. "No follow-up, no copies, no questions." I asked what happened to the report. He didn't blink. "Shut up and bill the feds." I left that room with my stomach in knots. Something about that night wouldn't let go of me. I started dreaming about it, about that ride, about his words. Sometimes I'd wake up with my fingers still burning from where he touched me. Other times I'd hear static in the walls of my apartment, like someone left a radio on just out of reach. Then, 2 weeks later, I found the envelope. No postmark, no return address, just my name, hand scrawled across the front in shaky letters that looked like they'd been written during an earthquake. Inside was a thumb drive, no other contents, no note. The label on the drive read one word, all caps, sharp marker strokes. Conflations. And something tells me, once I plug it in, there's no turning back. Unit D5 has been sealed until further notice. I've been cleaning this place for over 13 years. Floors, vents, cells, solitary intake, even the kitchen during the worst of the roach infestations. Seen it all. Blood, puke, piss, broken teeth, shredded uniforms, messages scratched into steel with plastic spoons. I don't talk much, and I don't ask questions. That's why they like me. That's why I get to come back night after night while the others burn out in 6 months or less. I mind my business. I sweep, I mop, I scrape dried blood off concrete. That's the job. But D5's different. D5 isn't on the schedule grid. It's not even on the building map. Most folks here don't know it exists. A whole subwing sealed years ago after a flood that never made it into the news. Rumor was some electric wiring fried near the floorboards and took out 4 cells and a med room. Nobody ever confirmed that. You just heard about it in whispers. Don't go near the south tunnel. That's D5. D5's where they put the lifers who ain't ever gonna see trial. D5's where the cameras blink too much. They never sent us in there. Not once. Until tonight. I got the order just after 10, slipped into my locker with a note from the assistant warden. Black ink, official stamp, short and sweet. Immediate sanitation required. D5 wing, use discretion. No support staff needed. My stomach turned reading it. I followed the hallway past C block, down where the motion sensor lights don't always work and the air starts to taste like wet drywall. There's a steel door with no label at the end. Most people think it leads to an old generator closet. It doesn't. My keycard worked. That surprised me. The door opened slow, creaking like something inside was resisting it. The smell hit me first. Not rot, not bleach, something in between. Metallic, sharp, like the inside of a broken battery mixed with sweat and burned plastic. I stepped through with my cart and flicked on the portable lamp since the overheads were out. That's when I saw the blood. Not pooled, not fresh, but smeared. Long streaks across the floor, like someone had been dragged. There were patches of dried footprints too, bare and uneven, and on the wall just past the threshold, scratched into the paint over and over. It's under us. Some letters were carved so deep the drywall flaked into dust. There were 4 rooms in the D5 corridor, 3 empty, 1 not. I stepped into the last room and froze. The walls were covered in black residue, as if something had been burned just inches from the surface. The mattress lay in the center of the floor, not on a frame, just flat on the ground, charred in a near-perfect circle at the center. Not like someone spilled a cigarette or started a fire. It was precise, deliberate, like something had scorched the bed from within. In the corner was a mirror, full length, its frame bent and twisted like it had been dropped from a great height, but it wasn't broken, not shattered. Instead, it had been covered, carefully, tightly, with black cloth. The edges were stapled into the wall behind it. Someone didn't want that thing exposed. The glass beneath the cloth was silent, waiting. Beside the mattress sat an envelope, aged and water-warped, with 4 words written across the front in rushed, almost panicked handwriting. "If I die, burn this." My breath caught in my throat. I looked behind me, half expecting someone to be standing in the doorway, watching, but I was alone. The silence in D5 wasn't natural. It wasn't absence of noise silence. It was something heavier, like the wing itself had been muzzled. I should have burned it. I should have followed the instructions, but I didn't. I peeled the envelope open and unfolded the pages inside. There were 6 sheets, front and back, covered in a tight scrawl I recognized instantly from the med files I'd cleaned up earlier that week. I'd seen his handwriting. This was his. It wasn't a confession in the legal sense. No names, no dates. But it read like someone trying to purge their soul before something came to collect it. Rambling at first, disjointed, then sharper, focused. He wrote about visitors who never signed in, men with no faces in the paperwork, suits that didn't wrinkle, voices that didn't echo. He said they came after midnight, always together, always with a black bag. They didn't ask questions. They just stood in the doorway and waited for the guards to leave, and the guards always did. He wrote about waking up with bruises he couldn't explain, missing hours, voices humming through the vents in languages no one speaks anymore. He said he started keeping track, scratching numbers behind the loose tile near the sink. When I checked, I found them 62 little hash marks, like a countdown. The pages got darker. He started talking about the tunnels beneath the building, said there's a passage that runs under D5, connected to an older foundation long since walled off. Wrote that one night he heard something moving under the floor, dragging something heavy. He pressed his ear to the concrete and heard breathing, not gasps or sleep murmurs, but deep, slow inhales like a sleeping beast. He said it called to him in dreams. Said he saw a door under the water, far below the prison, and behind it were the ones who built the music industry, the ones who wrote the scripts long before cameras were invented. He wrote, "I thought I was chosen because of my power, but I was chosen because I was weak. I was hollow, easy to fill." The last page was worse. It had no handwriting, just a printed slip, cut out and taped to the bottom. 40.8946 DGN, 73.865 DGW. I didn't recognize it at first, but curiosity is a hard thing to kill. I punched the coordinates into my phone once I was back in my van. a decommissioned military facility in upstate New York. Cold War era, defunct, no public access, fenced, quiet. I sat in the driver's seat with the letter in my lap, heart thudding, throat dry. The lights above the service road flickered once, twice, then died altogether. I didn't move. I just sat there, listening to the silence press in through the van's windshield. Something had happened in D5, something no mop or bleach can erase. And now I wasn't just a janitor anymore. I was a witness. Chapter 6. We couldn't stop the blood test. Begin transcript. Date redacted. File reference classified. Clearance level 4 and above. Subject. Preliminary biological anomaly report. Patient referred to only as the detainee. I don't know who's going to listen to this. Maybe no one. Maybe it gets buried like the others. But they told me to record a full oral log before closing my access to the files. I suppose this is my last official act before I disappear behind a long, paid medical leave. That's what they're calling it. I know better. I know a buried job when I see one. I've done this long enough. Let me start from the beginning, before things went sideways. We were contracted to run full diagnostic panels on a high-priority inmate, transferred into MTC's off-book medical wing. I wasn't given a name at first, just a patient ID. They said it was routine, determine baseline vitals, run full virology and toxicology workups, build an immune profile, log anything anomalous, and forward it up the chain. Nothing new. We'd done this before for other sensitive subjects. I use the quotes deliberately. These are the kind of people the Bureau doesn't like to list in annual reports. The first sample came from a blood draw ordered the night after his emergency hospital transport. What flagged me immediately wasn't the contents. It was the behavior of the sample itself. Blood clots normally, everyone's does. It's a biological constant. But this? The second it touched open air, the plasma turned opaque and gelatinous, like rubber hardening. Not in minutes, in seconds. It sealed the test tube shut like it was trying to protect something inside. We thought it was a fluke. Contaminated needle, maybe a reaction with old tubing. I ordered a fresh draw, this time under sterilized conditions. Double gloves, clean room, same result. The third draw yielded different numbers. Same person. Same location, but where the first had shown signs of severe immunodeficiency, T-cell suppression, white count down, flagged HIV-like markers, the second showed hyperactive cell division, red count doubled, white count normalized, platelet clusters that looked precancerous but weren't behaving like any cancer I've ever studied. So we ran it again, then again. 3 tests in a row, back-to-back from the same vial, with readings that told 3 different stories. One reading showed autoimmune collapse, the next, superhuman recovery, the third, total biological stasis. I submitted an anomaly report. It was ignored. So I went further. We examined his hair, what little was left. Grayed at the root, but the outer keratin sheath was coated with a protein compound I didn't recognize. Sent it to 3 separate labs. All 3 results came back marked unidentifiable. Not unknown, not rare, just nothing. By then, the rumors had already begun circulating inside the medical unit. Quiet ones, whispers in break rooms. A nurse said she saw him bite through a plastic spoon without blinking. An orderly claimed he caught him standing still for 6 hours, literally unmoving, eyes wide open, staring at the corner of the room, lips twitching like he was reciting something silently. I dismissed it as paranoia at first. Stress. MDC isn't an easy place to work. But the blood didn't lie, and the reports kept getting stranger. One night a tech came to me pale as bone, said the 4th blood draw had moved in its vial while she was labeling it, said it shifted under the surface, pulsed like a heartbeat. I thought she was exaggerating, but when I reviewed the security feed, she wasn't. I don't know how to explain it. It was subtle. But it wasn't still. It twitched like something alive just under the red. At this point, I submitted a formal escalation, requested oversight from our internal review board. Denied. I asked for a joint consult with immunology. Denied. Instead, I received a warning from administrative. Continue with standard protocol, do not extrapolate beyond assigned scope. They didn't want answers, they wanted silence. And I can't blame them, because if what we found is true, this man, this detainee, isn't sick. He's changing. No, scratch that. He's already changed. I saw it in his eyes the last time I entered the room to draw samples myself. Not madness, not illness. Something worse. Recognition. Like he knew exactly what I was there to find, and he was waiting for me to see it. His pulse was calm. His skin was cold but dry. When I tried to find a vein, I noticed his blood wasn't under the skin the way it should be. It was deeper, like it had retreated. And when I drew the syringe back, what came out wasn't blood. Not exactly. It was darker, denser, clotted midair before it reached the tube. I kept that sample. I know I wasn't supposed to. I hid it in a secondary refrigeration unit with a misprinted label. A week later, that entire fridge was removed from the facility without explanation. No order, no transfer log, just gone. That's when I knew it wasn't just me watching him. There were others. I started getting coded memos, phrases that didn't make sense, instructions to report to empty labs, an email signature from a director who'd retired 5 years ago. I tried to log into my terminal one morning and found my credentials suspended. No reason given, just a letter on my desk folded 3 times, standard HR header. Indefinite medical leave, effective immediately. I asked where to send my final reports. The clerk looked confused. There are no records under your name for that case, she said. They erased everything. But I still have this recording, and I still remember what he said. Not to me, not to any of the staff. He said it to the vent above his bed one night when he didn't know I was listening. They keep calling it a disease, he whispered. But I'm not the one infected. I'm the vessel. A pause. It's older than words. Older than bones. And it's hungry. I don't care what they say. This isn't about illness. It's not about mutation. He was the carrier for something that never wanted to be seen again. And now it's, Chapter 7. I heard him in my sleep. I hadn't been on the job long when it started, maybe 6 weeks in, tops. You could still hear it in my voice when I called over the radio, that green around the hedges tone that older COs always rolled their eyes at. I still said sir too often, still triple-checked my belt like I was going into a damn war zone. It was mostly overnight shifts at that point, quiet hours. The kind where nothing happens unless something goes really wrong, and for a while that's how it was. Until the night I started hearing him. I never saw him, not once, only heard the stories, like everyone else. The whispers about special handling, about the off-the-books unit, about how no one ever moved that inmate without a shadow walking ahead of them first. The name wasn't even used out loud, people just said him, or the VIP. Some would trace a little cross on their chest when they mentioned that wing, like this place was a church and he was the thing you weren't supposed to pray to. But me? I'd only ever walked past his cell block once, on accident. Didn't even know it at the time. Just a wrong turn during rounds. The hallway was too cold, lights too dim, and everything smelled still, like time stopped working there. My supervisor caught me and pulled me back, hard. Told me if I ever went near that section again without a direct order, I'd be reassigned to trash runs in seg for a month. No explanation, just, don't. So I didn't. Not until after they said he was gone. That's how they phrased it, gone. No paperwork, no final escort, just one day he wasn't here anymore. Guys joked he got ghosted by the feds. One of the older guards claimed he burned himself out of the building. Nobody said it straight, but we all knew something happened. It was a week later when I started hearing it. My post that night was near Intake Hall C. Nothing special, just check the cameras, log the rotation, stay awake. Around 2:40 a.m. I heard it soft, almost a hum, coming through the vent in the corner of the room. At first I thought it was pressure cycling. This building wheezes like an old man most nights. But this wasn't metal, it was syllables, words, human. I leaned in close, there was no mistaking it. Whispers. Not panicked or fast, just steady. Like a voice, reciting something from memory. I couldn't understand most of it. Some of the words didn't sound like English at all, but a few stuck out. One of them was a name I recognized, Taurus, a CO who'd been reassigned after the riot. No one had seen him since. Another name came through later, Ramos. I didn't even remember him until I looked it up the next day. An inmate, one who'd reportedly self-transferred but had no destination listed in the logbook. And then it happened again the next night. And the next. Same voice, same tone. Sometimes naming cells, sometimes describing places in the building no one talks about. Sub-levels I'd never seen on the map. At one point he said something in what sounded like Latin, or maybe Greek, the kind of language that sticks in your brain wrong, like a splinter you can't quite pull out. I told my supervisor. He laughed and said I needed sleep. Maybe he was right, but I couldn't let it go. So I went looking. I used my off-hunters to dig through old digital logs, stuff stored in the archives that most people don't even touch. You'd be surprised what they let us see if no one's watching. I searched his name. Nothing came up. No inmate ID, no medical records, no movement reports. Just one file buried deep in the internal case review folder, labeled 29B/witness transfer. The rest of the document was almost entirely redacted, but there was one sentence that wasn't. Patient moved to via Order 29B, further exposure risk considered high. I'd never heard of an Order 29B. Neither had the shift lead or the infirmary guy I asked. One of the night clerks told me quietly that anything tagged under 29B meant external authorization, not Bureau of Prisons, not DOJ. Something higher, something old. That night, the dreams started. They weren't like regular dreams, more like being dropped into someone else's memory. I'd find myself in a room with no ceiling, white walls stretching forever, and something like static crackling under my skin. In the center of the room, there'd be a circle drawn in ash, or blood, or both. And above it, suspended in the air without strings or support, was a man. Gray hair, thin face, mouth open like he was screaming, but no sound came out. Just that static, that crackling void. Every night it got clearer, closer, until one night I saw his eyes. They were mine. I stopped sleeping after that. I started keeping my rounds tight, cutting corners where I could, avoiding certain halls without knowing why. But the whispering didn't stop. Sometimes it followed me, through the vents, through the drains. Once, I was sure I heard it in my locker, just for a second. I told myself I was imagining things, that stress was making me hear patterns in noise, but deep down, I knew better. And then came the night I found the closet. I was locking up near the mechanical subfloor after a water line burst earlier that week. The janitors had already cleared out and the corridor was empty, but one of the overhead bulbs flickered, casting shadows across the wall, and that's when I noticed the door. Utility closet, no label, looked like it hadn't been opened in years. I only tried the handle because I was tired of pretending I wasn't curious anymore. It opened with a creak so soft I barely heard it. Inside there was nothing. No tools, no mop, no storage bins. Just a folded prison uniform sitting neatly in the center of the floor. Clean, pressed, MDC standard issue. and still warm to the touch. No tag, no number, just there. I backed out slowly, closed the door, didn't say a word. I still haven't. But sometimes, late at night when the vents go quiet, I think I hear the whisper again. Not from the ducts, not from the walls, from the uniform itself. And I think he's still here. Or maybe he never left. Chapter 8, The Last Person Who Saw Him. If you're listening to this, then it means the safeguards failed, or someone on the inside got careless. Maybe they forgot how easy it is to confuse the truth with a lie, especially when it's buried beneath enough red tape and doctrine. I never thought I'd be the one recording something like this. I took vows, I followed protocols, but when a man like that looks you in the eye and says he's already dead, you stop worrying about what you're supposed to do. You start listening. The last time I saw him, it was after midnight. I had just finished rounds in the East Wing Chapel, a room so quiet it hums like it's remembering something old. The request came through the back door, no escort, no signed form, just a whisper from one of the guards who refused to speak above a breath. He wants to talk. Alone. Says it's urgent. They wouldn't say his name, but they didn't need to. I knew who they meant. Everyone knew. He hadn't spoken to anyone in days. Not the medtechs, not the shrinks, not even the night nurse with the steady hands. But he asked for me. I found him in one of the overflow med rooms, the kind they never quite cleaned properly after a riot years back. The walls were the wrong color, the windows bricked in, the air tasted like dust and metal. He sat in a chair bolted to the floor, arms loose in his lap, his gown stained near the collar like something had leaked out of him recently. His hair had gone full gray by then. His face looked thinner than the photos, more angular, more ancient. There was something in his eyes that didn't match the rest of his body, like they belonged to someone much older. Or maybe someone much younger, pretending. He didn't greet me, didn't ask for a prayer, just lifted his eyes to mine and said, "I need to clear my soul before the end." I remember his voice. It wasn't theatrical or grand. It was quiet, measured, like he'd already rehearsed what he was about to say, maybe 1,000 times, maybe in dreams. He said it started long before the money, before the music, before the fame. Said he was chosen not for his talent but for his willingness. You have to be hollow for them to use you, he said, hollow and hungry. He didn't name the ones who came at first, just described them. Voices on the phone with no name on the screen. Meetings in hotels with no check-in records. Packages delivered by drivers who never blinked. Every promise came with a phrase, "We'll make sure you're remembered." He said he used to think that meant legacy, awards, buildings with his name on them. But now, he said, he understands it was literal. "They need me to disappear," he whispered, "because what's inside me can't die. It just finds someone else to wear." He started listing names, quietly, carefully. People I recognized, politicians, celebrities, even a former chaplain who'd vanished from this very facility a decade ago. He said they were part of a cycle, something older than institutions, something that wore the world like a skin and slipped between the seams of culture, power, and entertainment. "They taught us to dance in the fire," he said, "to sing the invocation in secret rooms. The parties weren't about pleasure, they were about ritual, about opening." He said that after the last one, some place in the desert, a building that wasn't on any GPS, something changed inside him. Something woke up. He started losing time, bleeding without wounds, speaking in languages he never learned. At first he thought it was psychosis, stress, a breakdown. But then others started reacting to him, shying away. Doctors stammering mid-sentence, orderlies refusing to meet his eyes, equipment failing when he entered the room. And then came the visits, the real ones. Men who left no trace on security logs, always arriving between 3 and 4 a.m., always leaving before sunrise. He said they never spoke out loud, only nodded, only placed their hands on his shoulders and waited until the shaking stopped. He told me there was a room beneath the prison, one that didn't exist on any map. Said he woke up in it once, on a table surrounded by candlelight, with a ring of symbols carved into the walls that vibrated like living muscle. It was breathing, he said. The room itself was breathing. He told me they cut him open that night, not with scalpels, but with sound. Said the frequencies peeled his mind away from his body and invited something in. Something old, something sacred to them. He didn't cry, didn't scream, just stared at the floor like it was whispering secrets only he could hear. I asked him if he wanted to pray. He shook his head. "I'm past that," he said. "But you're not. That's why I'm telling you." I sat there in silence. I didn't know what to say. There's no seminary course for this. No gospel verse about housing an ancient force in a federal prison and trying to exorcise it through confession. When I stood to leave, he reached out, not fast, just slow and deliberate, and took my hand. His skin was cold, dry, but there was something under it. A pulse that didn't feel like blood. A rhythm that didn't match any human heartbeat. "If you see me again," he said, "don't look too closely. It won't be me, not really." That was the last thing he ever said to me. He never left the prison after that, not officially. But the next morning, his cell was empty. His chart was deleted. No forwarding file, no discharge form, just absence. A perfectly scrubbed space, like he'd never been there at all. And now, years later, I keep seeing him. Not on television, not in the news. In dreams, in reflections that linger longer than they should. In crowded streets where a gray-hailed man walks just ahead of me, never turning, never slowing, always just out of reach. And last week I saw the footage. I wasn't supposed to. Someone sent it anonymously. No return address, no watermark. A static glitched security tape from the rear service gate at MDC Brooklyn. You can only see a few seconds before the screen cuts out, but it's enough. A man walks through the open gate, unescorted. His hair is gray, his stride smooth, too smooth, familiar. He doesn't look at the camera. He doesn't need to. Because the part that stays with me, the part that won't leave my mind even now as I record this, is that his face never comes into view. Like whatever came out of that prison didn't want to be seen. Or maybe couldn't be. Because it wasn't meant to be looked at. Not directly. Not anymore.